So when you think of the United States and Canada, what first comes to mind?
Friendly neighbors, probably. That long border.
Exactly. The world's longest undefended border. It's a powerful image.
It really is.
But what's really interesting, and maybe surprising, is that despite this peace, this, friendly image,
There's actually been quite a bit of conflict, real friction.
it's a paradox, isn't it? That perception of just total harmony.
Mm-hmm. It often overshadows, well, a history that includes wars, disputes, disagreements.
Right. It's not static. It's almost like a masterclass in agreeing to disagree sometimes.
On a huge scale, yeah.
Okay, so that's our mission for this deep dive. We want to pull back the curtain a bit on the full story.
Look behind the friendly headlines.
Yeah. From those early wars, the territorial disputes right up to modern stuff like trade fights, even environmental arguments.
We want to give you a solid understanding of what actually tests this unique relationship.
And we've pulled the key info for you from sources like U.S.-Canada conflicts and enduring friendship, and also U.S.-Canada conflicts and neighborly rivalry explored.
Just trying to get you the most important pieces.
So to really get this friendly rivalry, we need to rewind way back.
Before Canada was even Canada as we know it today.
Exactly. Back when Britain controlled that land, British North America, the seeds were already there.
Colonial times. And during the American Revolution, the U.S. actually tried to invade.
They did, up into what's now Canada. But those attempts, well, they failed.
Didn't stop there, though. That failure kind of set the stage for more.
Which brings us to the War of 1812. A huge one.
Oh, absolutely. The U.S. and Britain clashed again, right there on, future Canadian soil.
And some really dramatic things happened. American forces burning parts of York.
Which is Toronto today.
Right, Toronto. And then the British retaliated, burning Washington, D.C.
Quite the escalation. These early wars were just pivotal. They defined the initial tensions.
And started shaping that border we see today.
Carving out the lines.
So, okay, the fighting eventually cools down, but the border itself, still messy.
Oh, definitely. After American independence, the arguments just continued. Where exactly does the line go?
It's like putting together a giant puzzle, but maybe the picture on the box is blurry.
That's a good way to put it. And you get these intense moments in the 1800s. The Oregon boundary dispute, for example.
54 degrees 40 or fight.
Exactly. That famous slogan shows how heated it got. They were demanding the border go way up north.
And then there was Alaska.
Right, the Alaska boundary dispute.
Yeah.
That popped up after the U.S. bought Alaska from Russia. Suddenly, a new border section needed defining.
And this is important from the Canadian side, while, Britain and Canada negotiated to avoid more war.
There was a feeling of betrayal, wasn't there?
Very much so. Many Canadians felt Britain kind of sold them out in the deals made with the Americans over these borders.
You can still feel that history sometimes. It shows how even peaceful settlements can leave a sting.
It wasn't just lines on a map.
No, it was about trust, fairness, how they saw their powerful neighbor, and their relationship with Britain, too.
Okay, so we've moved from actual battles over land to these really intense negotiations about where the lines are drawn. But what happens next? The guns are mostly silent. The map is mostly drawn. Does the friction just disappear?
Not disappear, no. It evolves. It changes shape.
How so?
Well, as we get into the 20th century, and definitely the 21st, the main battleground shifts.
From military to...
Trade. Economic disputes really become the primary source of friction.
Which maybe isn't that surprising when you think about it. They're each other's biggest trading partners, right?
It's a massive trade relationship.
Yeah.
Billions of dollars flowing back and forth.
So that closeness, that economic intimacy, it naturally creates friction points.
It does. And some of these are really persistent issues, things that flare up again and again.
But like what specifically? What are the recurring arguments?
Well, the classic one is softwood lumber. That's been going on for decades.
Ah, yes, the lumber dispute. What's the core issue there? Is it just tariffs?
It's deeper than just tariffs, really. It gets into, fundamental differences in how the economies are structured.
Okay.
So the U.S. side often argues that Canada unfairly subsidizes its lumber industry.
How?
By selling timber harvested from public lands, crown lands, at rates the U.S. sees as below market value.
Ah, okay. So the U.S. feels its private companies can't compete fairly.
Exactly. And that leads to this cycle of U.S. imposing duties, Canada protesting, legal challenges.
Yeah.
It just goes round and round.
And it's not just lumber, is it?
No. No. You see similar tensions with dairy products, other agricultural goods too. Different systems of supply management or subsidies clash.
You'd think big trade deals would solve this, like NAFTA?
Well, the NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, it definitely aimed to smooth things over, reduce barriers.
But it didn't completely eliminate these kinds of fights.
No. And even its replacement, the USMCA, the new agreement, it hasn't fully ended these economic arguments either.
So the deals help manage the relationship, but they don't erase the underlying differences in specific sectors.
Precisely. It's like neighbors arguing over the fence line or who should trim the hedge, but on a massive economic scale. Softwood lumber is the hedge.
That's a good analogy. Okay, so beyond trade, what else? New challenges emerging.
Yeah, definitely. Environmental issues have become a bigger factor. And security, of course.
On the environment front, Canada has huge energy resources, right? Oil and gas.
Especially from the oil sands. And naturally, they want to sell that energy, primarily to the U.S. market.
Which leads us to things like pipelines.
Keystone XL, that's the perfect example.
Huge controversy.
Massive. Protests, political battles on both sides. It wasn't just about the pipeline itself, you know.
It became about broader things.
Yeah, wider debates about climate change,
Yeah.
energy security, indigenous rights, environmental impact. It touched on so many sensitive issues.
And then there's the Arctic. That's becoming more relevant too.
Increasingly so.
Cool.
As the ice melts up there, new shipping routes are opening.
Creating new opportunities, but also potential disputes.
Exactly. Both the U.S. and Canada claim overlapping territories in the Arctic Ocean and have different views on things like the Northwest Passage. Is it an international strait or Canadian internal waters?
Another line-drawing issue, in a way.
In a sense, yes, but driven by climate change and new economic possibilities.
And you mentioned security. How does that fit in?
Well, managing that huge border, it requires constant cooperation. Think about border crossings, immigration, customs, counterterrorism.
Generally, they work very closely on that concept.
Extremely closely. The cooperation is deep. But, you know, policy changes in one country can create ripples, tensions, challenges for the other. Think about shifts in immigration policy or security alerts.
So it requires ongoing management, even if the overall relationship is cooperative.
Constant communication, constant coordination. It's a testament to the relationship, actually, that they manage it so well most of the time.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. Wars, border fights, trade spats, pipelines.
It sounds like a lot of arguing.
It does. Which brings us back to the core question. Given all this history, what is the state of the relationship today? Does all this conflict mean they secretly dislike each other?
Well, despite everything we've talked about, all the friction points, the fundamental truth remains.
They're incredibly close allies.
One of the strongest alliances in the world. Absolutely.
They were founding members of NATO.
They share intelligence at incredibly deep levels. They've fought side by side in conflicts across the globe.
That shows a real alignment, doesn't it, on big picture stuff?
A foundational alignment of values, strategic interests. It goes deeper than disagreements over lumber or pipelines. Cooperation and friction can and do coexist.
And it's not just governments. The people-to-people ties
Are immense. Millions cross that border every year. For work, business, tourism, family.
The connections are just woven into the fabric of both societies.
Definitely. So, yes, disputes flare up. They always have. They probably always will.
Like dandelions in spring, as you said earlier?
Exactly. But the overall relationship, it's defined by this deep friendship and huge mutual interests.
So, circling back to that first question, do they hate each other?
Far from it. It's much more like, well, like close neighbors? Or maybe even family.
They argue.
They argue over history, over money, over who gets to use what part of the yard, metaphorically speaking.
But what keeps them close? What's the glue?
I think it's a shared commitment, fundamentally, to diplomacy, to finding solutions, to democracy.
And that peaceful border itself.
That border is so symbolic. It really represents what good neighbors can achieve, even when they don't agree on everything.
Maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on.
Go for it.
Consider this. Maybe that undefended border isn't just about the absence of conflict. Maybe it's also a symbol of how having those occasional well-managed arguments actually makes the friendship stronger in the long run.
That's a really interesting thought, that facing disagreements, honestly, even if it's tense, can actually reinforce the relationship rather than weaken it.
Builds resilience, perhaps.
Yeah. A sign of a mature, enduring friendship that can handle the bumps in the road.